Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Melissa O'Leary, CSO at Fortalice Solutions. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I want to talk about two stories today that have made headlines, big stories. They are vastly different, but each contain, and really when it comes down to the crux of the story, a cybersecurity element that I would love to get your take on. So first I want to talk about 23andMe. They filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy earlier this week, and they're looking to sell the company. As most of us know, 23andMe is a genetic testing company. A lot of people send their personal genetic data to them. What do you make of this news?
I think it's there's two sides to the coin. I think a few years ago there was so much interest and really groundbreaking things that occurred for many families, many different people across the world with this new technology. And the brand promise at that time was that the information would be secured and not be sold. I don't think anybody really thought through the implications of a bankruptcy and what this could mean for the data of hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people.
And I think that's my next question that I want to pose to you. What is the implication here? If you have your data with 23andMe, what is going to happen to people's data?
We don't know yet. What we know from 23andMe is that they're stating that any purchaser of the company would be liable for the data, would have to meet the same standards that 23andMe is meeting today. And that could be the case in terms of, inking a sale, but I think, there's certainly a lot of value in the data, current uses of that data and future uses of the data as well. And it's to be seen how any purchaser, could kind of get around anything that 23andMe has in place today.
23andMe wrote an open letter to their customers, and this is what the company said. I want to read it in part. Quote, "Your data remains protected. The Chapter 11 filing does not change how we store, manage, or protect customer data. Our users' privacy and data are important considerations in any transaction, and we remain committed to our users' privacy and to being transparent with our customers about how their data is managed. Any buyer of 23andMe will be required to comply with applicable law with respect to the treatment of customer data." As a security expert here, does that exactly inspire confidence? Do you think people's data will be safe? I mean, what would the data be used for?
I think the data as it's stored today is very likely safe. I don't personally believe that it will be safe in the future. And I think that, the number of organizations that are saying, prioritize going into 23andMe and deleting your data now are absolutely right with their guidance. We just simply cannot know what the future holds. And in terms of how that information can be used, I think a really use case would be, let's say that the future purchaser is part of the insurance community and they use that data to create actuarial models, or they use that data, in a worst case scenario to pinpoint what genetic issues you or your family members might have in the future, and then use that on insurance rates. We don't know at this point in time if that's, something that's in the making, or if there's any interest there, but it's just an example of the value of that data and how it can be used in ways that folks never intended when they provided it.
That's a really scary thought when it comes to insurance companies, that an insurance company can buy this, see that you're predisposed to X, Y, or Z, see your health information and say, hey, you are charged a higher rate of insurance opposed to Joe Smith over there. So I'm thinking about, if someone nefarious comes in, does your data have to have the same protections that it does right now with 23andMe as it is today? Would your personal information be more hackable if someone else buys it?
I can't really say whether it would be more easily hackable. I think it would be, again, specific to whatever protections are in place by any purchaser of the information. But if somebody were to access the information, It's not only the genetics and the DNA, it's usernames, it's passwords, which have breached everywhere for for many of us in different breaches already, but also family connections. So something that I find interesting is I personally have not done genetic testing, but members of my family have. So I had kind of thought, well, I'm safe from this and from having any implications occur for me, but you could certainly draw a connection between myself and my family and their genetic makeup that can be used, kind of in future cases, or it could even be used in social engineering campaigns that we see every day to make those a little bit more sophisticated. Because perhaps you couldn't determine, who my second cousin is that I grew up with, but now you could go into the data and potentially find that and say, hey, cuz, what's going on? And have a real conversation there. So there's just so many different uses of the data for nefarious people, but then also, of course, those that want to monetize that kind of data.
I think that's an interesting point because when I was speaking with this story with a host of people, even if you haven't used 23andMe yourself, you have a sibling, an aunt, a cousin out there who have put their data in here, who have submitted that. So, what do you think people should do? Let's say you did submit your data to 23andMe to protect it.
If you submitted your data to 23andMe, I do suggest going in. There's a number of guides available and deleting that data. I think that you should do it both within the app or within the site, but then to also email them to state, I've deleted my data from your website so that you have a record of the deletion. It's not to say that 23andMe is not deleting data, but there's so many users going in and very likely doing this right now that they might not have a good trail of that occurring. So I think the best case scenario is go into the app, follow the steps in the settings, get the information removed, and then also just follow up with an email stating that you did it. I've also read that swabs are being stored and that in those preferences and in the settings, those are things that you can say you don't want them, you don't want your swab stored, you want it removed. And then there's, of course, the third party use of the information, and you might have opted into that. You can still go into your settings and opt out of that.
It's really interesting. In the beginning of this conversation, you said how these types of companies a few years ago were really touted as revolutionary. It can tell you so much about yourself. It can tell you about your family, who you're related to. It can give you insight into your health you otherwise wouldn't know. Now there are a lot of privacy concerns here. So in light of this Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing here, what do you think, or should there be anything done in the future to make sure that going forward, competitors of 23andMe, companies like this, will take more steps to protect people's data?
There's already a law in California, and I'm sure other states will follow. A challenge that we have in the privacy area is that it's a state by state patchwork. It's also a patchwork when you factor in the global regimes. So I think that there is a need for a federal mandate on this that protects people and doesn't make it, challenging for somebody to opt in or opt out of a service like this. If we don't have those protections in place, companies are going to kind of fall back on their terms of service and we'll continue to have these challenges. So I do think it's an area where the federal government should be involved and kind of lay out a framework and policy for companies.
I do now want to make a totally left turn here and talk about some news that broke just a few days ago. And that's The Atlantic's editor-in-chief wrote that he was inadvertently added to a group chat with the nation's top security advisors and leaders that detailed U.S. plans to conduct airstrikes in Yemen against the Houthis. What are your thoughts here from a cybersecurity expert?
Definitely mixed thoughts on this topic. Signal is really a best-in-class app for secure and encrypted messaging. And, according to the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, it's actually pre-installed on government laptops and phones. So, it's kind of to be seen whether the communication there was on personal devices, government devices, all of that back and forth. But I think that in terms of inadvertently adding a journalist, certainly unprecedented. And there's just a lot that we need to continue to kind of learn here. I know that there's a meeting on the Hill in progress right now on what happened, why it happened, and we'll learn a lot from that. And just a final thought is that I worked in the government under the Bush administration, and a lot of the policies and the laws in this space have to do with the classification of the information and protecting that information. So the administration has stated that there was no classified information in the exchange, which I think will have to be, fully vetted by the Intelligence Committee and by the Director of National Intelligence. But that would really kind of drive, I think, whether the administration ran afoul of anything.
I guess my question to you is, as the cybersecurity expert, you're not as concerned that Signal was used. You're more concerned that the journalist was inadvertently added, plus that this type of classified, sensitive information was shared on this app, or it's not even the app, it's just that he was added.
I think it's, as a cybersecurity expert, it's that he was added. I don't personally have issues with the Signal app. My philosophy is that everything is hacked or will be hacked. If there's a motivated adversary on one end of if there's a motivated adversary on one side of the equation, they're going to find a way to get in. And it doesn't matter if it's Signal, WhatsApp, Telegram, iMessage, an adversary is going to get in. It doesn't also matter if it's a kind of a highly classified system in the government. Those can also be infiltrated, obviously a lot harder for an adversary. So I do think it comes down to the information and how we're trained to share information and where we're sharing it.
The White House, the Trump administration, National Security Advisor Michael Waltz himself said that they're still trying to figure out how exactly Jeffrey Goldberg, that journalist from The Atlantic, was added to the chat. According to the screenshot, it says Michael Waltz added you to the chat. Is there any way he could have been nefariously added to this chat, or based on Signal, based on what you know of Signal, Michael Waltz himself or whoever was using his account had to add him?
That's a really intelligent question. And, from my experience with Signal, Michael Waltz would have had to have added him. The logging is pretty good on Signal. So I do think that that account is, Michael Waltz's true account is the one that would have added the journalist.
There's obviously been a lot of criticism here on what was shared on Signal, what was in those text messages, the fact that there were even different emojis used to talk about airstrikes in Yemen. As someone who worked for a White House in an administration, what would you advise the government to do here at this point? Should you still use Signal? Or is a SCIF, which is a room where you go in, you can't even bring a phone or a laptop, you can't have information leave the SCIF, is that protected room really the best way to keep classified information secret?
As somebody that worked in the administration, I was incredibly focused on what I put in writing in all courses of action, to include, just a simple kind of one-liner. Back in the day, we weren't using emojis as much. So I would hope that the future Melissa would not speak in emojis in official communications, but maybe I would. I think, we're kind of in that era where emojis are a form of communication. And, I think it's a lesson to the administration that, your information can and will leak. Even you might be the source of your own leak as well. So to really kind of perform that litmus test of what I'm saying right now, if this were in the press, would this be something I would be proud to have said, or should I maybe kind of scale back what I'm saying? With regard to whether communication should occur in SCIFs, I think the challenge there is really in the human user story. And all of these officials seem to be mobile at the time of the planning and the coordination for the strike. And, I think it's on the administration, as well as the civilian government and the DoD and others, to come up with better ways to securely communicate while officials are mobile, because that is just the way that things are today. We're not often, at the office, and especially in politics, you have a busy schedule and you're kind of running around. So, that's definitely something that I think needs to be pursued here.
I think to your point, and a wise piece of advice for everyone is to always watch what you put in writing. As a cybersecurity expert, again, do you think that there's anything missing then from this really national conversation when it comes to this story?
What I think is missing is the the magnitude of just our simple actions and the ripple effects that they can have. We've all had those kind of, we're all communicating on our phones. We're, probably in our phones too much, and our personal communications or official communications are all conflated in these apps. And I think what's important is to talk about, how do we break that apart? How do we make it easier and to have more streamlined communication and not have to, kind of be in this bifurcated world of communication, especially when it comes to personal and professional, because a device now isn't, 20 years ago, it was you had your work cell phone and you did your work stuff on it, and maybe you had a personal cell phone. And now today it's all in one place, and we need to do a better job as security practitioners, but then also as technologists to give better options to folks.
Melissa O'Leary, I appreciate your insight into these conversations. Thank you so much for joining me. You are welcome back anytime.
Thank you. It was nice to meet you.